The massive cruise ship Serenity's Grace moved through space like a floating city. Its white hull gleamed under the distant stars as it carried 50,000 passengers from 12 different alien races. The ship was heading through the Veil Nebula, a beautiful region of space known for its colorful gas clouds and peaceful trade routes. Captain Vorthok stood on the bridge, his tall Alterian frame casting a long shadow. His blue skin had the deep wrinkles that came from 40 years of space travel. He had commanded passenger ships for most of his life and had never lost a single soul. Today felt different, though. Something was wrong. Captain called out communication. Officer Yila from her station? The young Zenthari's silver eyes showed worry. We're getting strange readings from the navigation system. Vorthok walked over to look at her screen. The ship's path showed a clear route, but the energy readings were all wrong. What kind of readings? Unknown gravity sources, sir? They weren't there when we started this route last week. Yella's fingers moved quickly over her controls. The computer can't identify what's causing them. Before Vorthok could respond, the ship shuddered. It wasn't the gentle vibration of normal space travel. This was something else, something that made the lights flicker and caused passengers to look up in concern. Engineering report, Vorthok called into his communicator. Sir, we've got problems down here, came the reply from Chief Engineer Torvin. The main drive is fighting against something. It's like we're being pulled in different directions. The ship shuddered again, harder this time. Through the large windows of the bridge, Vorthok could see the nebulous colors starting to swirl in patterns that didn't look natural. The beautiful gas clouds were moving like they were alive. Oh, stop, Vorthok ordered. Cut the engines. Stopped. The ship didn't. It kept moving forward, pulled by forces that shouldn't exist. The Serenity's Grace was trapped. Captain, Ila's voice was sharp with fear. I'm detecting massive structures ahead. They're huge. On the main screen, dark shapes began to appear through the nebula. At first, they looked like asteroids. But as the ship got closer, the truth became clear. These weren't rocks. They were machines. Ancient machines the size of small moons, arranged in a perfect grid pattern that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Are those things? Whispered Navigator Blix, a small furry creature whose people were known for their excellent sense of direction. I don't know, Vorthok admitted, but they're old. Very old. The ship continued to move toward the grid of ancient machines. As they got closer, lights began to appear on the structures. Blue and green energy flowed between them like lightning. The Serenity's Grace was being pulled into a trap that had been waiting in space for who knows how long. Try the engines again, Vorthok ordered. Torvin's voice came back strained. No good, Captain. Something's got us. The engines are running, but we're not moving away from those things. Panic began to spread through the ship. Passengers from different worlds started gathering. In the common areas, their voices mixing in dozens of languages. Some were angry, others were scared. The sordid passengers, with their thick scales and sharp teeth, wanted to fight something, but there was nothing to fight. Send out a distress call, Vorthok told Yila. All frequencies. Someone has to hear. Asila worked at her station, sending out emergency signals on every communication channel the ship had. She broadcast in the common trade language and in the native tongues of all the major spacefaring races. The message was simple. They were trapped and needed help. Far away, at the edge of known space, the human ship Iron Will was on a routine exploration mission. It was much smaller than the Serenity's Grace, with a crew of only 200. It was built for different purposes, where the cruise ship was designed for comfort. The Iron Will was built to survive. Captain Rex Donovan sat in his command chair, reading reports from the ship's long-range sensors. Rex was typical of his species in many ways. His average height, brown hair, and eyes that seemed to see everything. But like all humans, he came from a world that other aliens called a death world. Earth was so dangerous that the creatures who evolved there were considered tough beyond belief. Captain called out Communications Officer Bell from her station. I'm picking up a distress signal. It's faint, but it's there. Rex looked up from his reports. Where's it coming from? Deep space, sir. Beyond the trade routes. Someone's in trouble out there. Rex stood up and walked over to Bell's station. The young woman had been with his crew for 3 years and was good at her job. If she said someone was in trouble, he believed her. "Can you clean up the signal?" Bell worked at her controls for a few minutes. Slowly, the static cleared and words became clear. It was a distress call from a ship called the Serenity's Grace. They were trapped by unknown forces and running out of time. Chief Martinez. Rex called to his engineering officer. "How long would it take us to reach these coordinates?" Luna Martinez was checking her calculations at the engineering station. She was a small woman with dark hair and hands that were always stained with machine oil. 3 days at maximum speed, sir." "But Captain, that's way outside our patrol area." "I know where it is, Chief. Or sir, if we go that far out, we'll be on our own. No backup, no support. We don't know what's out there." Rex looked at the distress signal information on the screen. 50,000 lives. Men, women, and children from a dozen different worlds. All of them trapped and scared and hoping someone would help them. "Set course for those coordinates," Rex ordered. "Maximum speed, sir," said his first officer, Tom Wade. "Are you sure about this? We're just one ship. What if it's a trap?" Rex looked at Tom. They had served together for 5 years and had been through many dangerous situations. "Tom, when did humans start leaving people to die just because it might be dangerous?" Tom nodded slowly. He understood. It wasn't in human nature to ignore cries for help, even from strangers, even from aliens who might not do the same for them. "All hands prepare for jump to hyperspace," Rex announced over the ship's communication system. "We have a rescue mission." As the Iron Will prepared to jump, its long-range sensors detected something interesting. Other ships were also moving toward the same coordinates. Big ships. Ships that weren't showing up in any database. The jump to hyperspace began. And the human ship disappeared into the swirling tunnel of faster-than-light travel. Behind them, space remained quiet and empty. Not for long. Something else was. Coming, something that had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. The Iron Will dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of blue light. Captain Rex Donovan immediately looked at the main screen and felt his breath catch in his throat. What he saw was beyond anything he had imagined. The Serenity's Grace hung in space like a toy caught in a spider's web. But this web was made of massive, ancient structures that stretched as far as the eye could see. Each structure was the size of a small moon, covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Energy beams connected them in perfect geometric patterns. "My God," whispered Chief Martinez from her engineering station. "What is that thing?" "It's a defense grid," said Dr. Emma Torres, the ship's science officer. She was a tall woman with gray hair who studied ancient alien cultures. Her eyes were wide with excitement and fear. "I've read about these in old reports, but I never thought they were real." Captain Rex moved closer to look at her readings. "What kind of defense grid?" "The kind built by the architects," Dr. Torres replied. "They were a race that disappeared. Millions of years ago. Some say they never existed at all. But this is their technology." On the main screen, they could see the cruise ship trying to move. Its engines were glowing bright white, but it wasn't going anywhere. The ancient machines held it in place with invisible forces. Captain called out Communications Officer Bell. "I'm getting signals from the trapped ship. They're asking for help." "Put them through," Rex ordered, the bridge filled with the voice of Captain Vorthok. His words were calm, but Rex could hear the worry underneath. "This is Captain Vorthok of the Serenity's Grace. We are trapped by unknown technology and cannot escape. Our life support systems are failing. With 50,000 passengers and crew aboard." Rex picked up his communicator. "Captain Vorthok, this is Captain Rex Donovan of the human ship, Iron Will. We received your distress call. We're here too. Help." There was silence for a moment. Then Vorthok's voice came back, sounding surprised. "Humans? You came all this way to help us?" "That's what we do," Rex replied simply. "Aboard the Serenity's Grace." Captain Vorthok stared at his communication screen. He had heard stories about humans. They came from a world so dangerous that it had turned them into something other races feared. They were called Deathworlders because their planet tried to kill them every day. Most aliens avoided them. But now a human ship had traveled across space to help them. It didn't make sense. "Sir," said Communication Officer Eula. "What should we tell the passengers?" Forthok thought for a moment. The passengers were already scared. If they knew humans were coming to rescue them, some might panic even more. Humans had a reputation for being violent and unpredictable. "Tell them help is coming," he said finally. "Don't mention who it is yet." Meanwhile, on the Iron Will, Dr. Torres was studying the ancient structures with growing concern. "Captain, these machines aren't just holding the ship. They're scanning it, learning about it." "Learning what?" Rex asked. "Everything. The ship's design, its crew, even the thoughts of the people inside. This technology is beyond anything we understand." Chief Pilot Jake Sullivan, a young man with quick hands and quicker reflexes, was studying the navigation data. "Captain, I found something else. These structures aren't just floating here. They're connected to something bigger, something buried in the nebula itself." Rex walked over to look at Jake's screen. The display showed energy patterns that went deep into the colorful gas clouds. Whatever was out there was huge. "Dr. Torres, what do you think we're dealing with?" The science officer shook her head. The architects were said to be builders and teachers. They left structures all over the galaxy to test younger races. But this one is different. It's more complex, more dangerous. "Can we break the ship free by force?" "I wouldn't recommend it, Captain. If we attack these structures, they might destroy the cruise ship to protect themselves." Rex nodded. He had expected this wouldn't be easy. Nothing ever was when humans tried to help others in space. On the Serenity's Grace, things were getting worse. The life support systems were failing faster than expected. The air was getting thin, and the temperature was dropping. Passengers from different worlds were starting to blame each other for their situation in one of the main gathering areas. A young Zenthari woman named Caladran was trying to keep peace between the different groups. She was a diplomat, trained to solve problems with words instead of fighting. "Please," she said to a group of angry Saurid passengers. "Fighting each other won't get us out of here. We need to work together." The lead Saurid, a large male with bright red scales, hissed at her. "Work together? Your people's navigation systems? Let us into this trap?" "The navigation systems belong to the ship, not to any one race," Kala replied calmly. "We're all passengers here. We're all in the same danger." A small crowd had gathered to watch the argument. Some nodded in agreement with Kala. Others supported the Saurids. The tension was growing. Back on the human ship, Rex was trying to figure out how to approach the ancient defense grid. Every scan they ran seemed to make the structures more alert. The blue lights were getting brighter, and new energy patterns were forming. "It's like they're waking up," observed Dr. Torres. "The more attention we pay to them, the more active they become." Captain called out Security Chief Marcus Webb from his station. "I'm detecting weapon systems on those structures. Big ones. If they decide we're a threat..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood. The ancient machines could destroy both ships without even trying hard. Rex made a decision. "Jake, take us closer. Nice and slow. No sudden movements." "Are you sure that's wise?" asked First Officer Wade. "The people on that ship are running out of time, Tom. We have to try something." The Iron Will began moving toward the trapped cruise ship. As they got closer, the ancient structures responded. New lights began flowing along their surfaces. Energy. Beams reached out to scan the human ship from top to bottom. "They're examining us," Dr. Torres reported, just like they did with the other ship. "What are they looking for, I think? I think they're trying to decide if we're worthy of something." "But worthy of what? I don't know." Suddenly, one of the massive structures moved. It rotated slowly, bringing what looked like a weapon to bear. On the Iron Will, the energy building up in the device made the space around it glow like a small star. "Evasive maneuvers," Rex shouted. Jake's hands flew over his controls, but the ancient weapon was faster. A beam of pure energy shot out, missing the human ship by only a few hundred meters. Where the beam passed, space itself seemed to bend and twist. "That's not possible," whispered Chief Martinez. "Energy weapons can't do that to space-time." Dr. Torres was reading her instruments with growing amazement and terror. Captain, I don't think these are just defense systems. I think they're testing us, both ships. They want to see how we respond to danger. Testing us for what? Before she could answer, more of the ancient structures began to move. The Iron Will found itself surrounded by weapons that could destroy planets. But the weapons weren't firing. They were waiting. Captain, came Yila's voice over the communication system. The Serenity's Grace is hailing us. Captain Vorthok wants to talk? Rex opened the channel. What is it, Captain? Captain Donovan, my science officer, has been studying these machines. She thinks they're not trying to kill us. They're trying to teach us something. Rex looked at Dr. Torres, who nodded slowly. He might be right, Captain. This could be some kind of ancient lesson. But the question is, what happens if we fail the test? The answer came from the structures themselves. Deep in the nebula, something massive began to stir. Something that had been sleeping for millions of years was starting to wake up. The ancient structures around both ships began to change. The blue lights that had been flowing along their surfaces turned white, then gold. The energy beams connecting the massive machines grew brighter and started pulsing in a steady rhythm. Like a giant heartbeat, Captain Rex watched his instruments as new readings appeared on every screen. Dr. Torres, what's happening out there? The science officer was working frantically at her station. The structures are creating some kind of field around us. It's like they're building a testing chamber. It's a testing chamber for what? Before she could answer, the space around both ships shimmered like water. Suddenly, holographic images began appearing in the air. They showed scenes of ships in danger, planets under attack, and people crying for help. On the bridge of the Serenities, Grace Captain Vorthok stared at the images with growing understanding. They're showing us choices, he said to his crew. Moral choices. Communication Officer Yila looked confused. What do you mean, Captain? Look at the images carefully, Vorthok explained. Each one shows a situation where someone must choose between saving themselves or helping others. The holographic scenes were becoming more detailed. They showed the Iron Will and the Serenity's Grace in different dangerous situations. In some images, the human ship escaped while the cruise ship was destroyed. In others, both ships worked together but faced terrible risks. Captain Rex understood what was happening. They want to see what kind of people we are, he said to his crew. This isn't just about rescuing a ship. It's about proving we're worthy of something. Security Chief Marcus Webb was studying the tactical displays. Captain, I'm detecting weapon systems charging on those structures. I think if we make the wrong choices, they'll destroy us both. The first test began without warning. The ancient machines created a holographic scenario where the Iron Will had enough power to save either itself or the cruise ship, but not both. The images showed the human crew facing this terrible choice. Rex looked at the simulation playing. Out in front of them, in the hologram, his ship's engines were failing and they had only enough energy for one jump to safety. The cruise ship was sinking into a gravity well, its passengers screaming for help. What would you do, Captain? Asked First Officer Wade quietly. Rex didn't hesitate. We'd save the cruise ship. We came here to help them. As soon as he spoke, the holographic scenario changed. It showed the Iron Will using its last power to boost the cruise ship to safety, while the human vessel was pulled into the gravity well. The crew watched themselves die to save strangers. The ancient structures pulsed with golden light. The first test was complete. On the Serenity's Grace, the crew had watched the same scenario. Captain Vorthok was amazed. The humans had chosen to sacrifice themselves without even thinking about it. He had heard stories about human courage, but seeing it was different. Sir, said Eula, the structures are creating a new test. The second scenario was more complex. It showed both ships working together to escape, but their cooperation would wake up something dangerous that slept in the nebula. The choice was between certain safety for themselves and unknown risk for the entire galaxy. This time, it was Captain Vorthok who had to answer first. The holographic Vorthok stood on his bridge, knowing that working with the humans might doom other worlds. The real Vorthok thought about his 50,000 passengers. His duty was to them, not to unknown worlds light years away. But as he looked At the images of sleeping planets that might be destroyed, he found he couldn't choose selfishness. "We would take the risk," he said aloud. "We would work together and face whatever comes." The structures pulsed again, this time with silver light, mixed with the gold. Aboard the Iron Will, Dr. Torres was recording everything. "Captain, I think I understand what's happening. These tests aren't just random, they're specific to our species." "What do you mean?" "The scenarios they're showing us are designed to test the things that make humans and these other races unique. They want to see if we'll stick to our values even when it costs us everything." The third test was the hardest yet. The holographic scenario showed a situation where saving the cruise ship would require the humans to use weapons that could destroy entire star systems. The ancient machines wanted to know if the humans would risk becoming monsters to save innocent lives. Rex stared at the images. In the scenario, his crew had access to planet-killing weapons left behind by the architects. They could use them to break the defense grid and free the cruise ship. But once used, the weapons couldn't be controlled. They might destroy everything in the region. "This is impossible," whispered Chief Martinez. "How can we choose between saving those people and risking billions of others?" "There has to be another way," Rex said firmly. "There's always another way." He turned to his crew. "What if we don't choose either option? What if we refuse to accept that these are our only choices?" Dr. Torres looked up from her instruments. "Captain, that might be exactly what they want to hear." Rex spoke to the ancient structures as if they could understand him. "We reject both choices. We'll find a third option. We always do." The structures around both ships began to pulse faster. The golden and silver lights were joined by streams of blue and green. Something was changing. On the cruise ship, things were getting desperate. The life support systems were failing faster now. Engineer Torvin was working with a team of technicians from different species, trying to boost power to the air recyclers. "We've got maybe 6 hours of air left," he reported to Captain Vorthok. After that, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what would happen. In the passenger areas, Caladrayan was still working to keep peace between the different groups. But it was getting harder. Fear was making people act badly. "Listen to me," she said to a crowd of mixed species. "The humans came here to help us. They didn't have to. They could have ignored our distress call and stayed safe. But they didn't." A sword male hissed angrily. "Humans are violent. They'll probably try to take over our ship. If they wanted to take over our ship, would they be out there risking their lives against those ancient weapons?" Kala asked. "They could have left us here and no one would have blamed them." Her words were having an effect. Some of the passengers were starting to think about what the humans were doing for them, back on the Iron Will. The crew was watching their instruments with growing concern. The ancient structures were doing something new. They were combining their energy outputs, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Captain called out Jake from the pilot station. "Something's coming. Something big." On the long-range sensors, a massive signature was approaching from deep in the nebula. It was larger than anything they had ever seen. Larger than space. Stations larger than the biggest ships ever built. "What is that thing?" Rex asked. Dr. Torres was pale as she read her instruments. I think it's one of them. One of the architects. And it's been sleeping in this nebula for millions of years. The ancient defense grid had been testing them to see if they were ready to meet its creators. And now, ready or not, that meeting was about to happen. Space around the ancient defense grid suddenly filled with flashes of light. One by one, massive ships emerged from hyperspace jumps. But these weren't like any vessels in the known galaxy databases. They were human ships, but built for war. Captain Rex stared at his screens in amazement. He counted 20 ships, then 30, then lost count as more kept arriving. Each one was larger than his Iron Will, with dark hulls covered in weapons that looked like they could crack planets. "Captain," said Communications Officer Bell, her voice shaking, "I'm getting a signal from the lead ship. It's Admiral Morrison." Rex knew that name. Every human in space knew that name. Mace Kate Morrison commanded humanity's deep space defense fleet, the ships that protected Earth's outer colonies from unknown threats. But what was she doing here? "Put her through," Rex ordered. the main screen filled with the image of a stern woman in her 50s. Admiral Morrison had gray hair pulled back in a tight military style, and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her, Rex could see the bridge of a warship that looked like it had been built to fight gods. "Captain Donovan," the Admiral said, "you've stirred up quite a mess out here." "Admiral Morrison, I wasn't expecting fleet support for a rescue mission." Expression was serious. "This stopped being just a rescue mission the moment you triggered the architect systems. Those ancient machines sent out a signal that reached Earth's deep space monitoring stations, a signal we've been waiting for." Rex felt confused. "Waiting for, ma'am? What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Humanity has known about the architects for over 200 years. We've been preparing for their return." On the bridge of the Serenity's Grace, Captain Vorthok and his crew watched the human fleet with growing amazement and fear. The ships looked like they had been designed by engineers who understood that the universe was a dangerous place and had built accordingly. "How many ships are there?" asked Eula. Navigator Blix was counting frantically. "At least 50, Captain. Maybe more. And they're all armed like battleships." Vorthok had heard rumors about human military capability, but seeing it was different. These ships looked like they could fight entire fleets and win. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the communication channels, addressing both ships. "All vessels. This is Admiral Morrison commanding the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here to assist with the rescue operation and to make contact with the architect systems." "Contact?" Rex asked. "Admiral, these machines nearly destroyed us during their tests." "The tests were necessary, Captain. The architects needed to know what kind of species we've become. Your responses, and those of the cruise ship crew, have impressed them." Dr. Torres looked up from her science station. "Admiral, are you saying the architects are still alive?" Morrison nodded. "Very much alive, Doctor. They've been sleeping in various locations around the galaxy, waiting for younger races to prove they were ready for the next phase of galactic development." The massive shape that had been approaching from deep in the nebula was now close enough to see clearly. Wasn't a ship in any normal sense. It was more like a living city, made of the same materials as the defense grid, but shaped like something organic, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "That's an architect vessel," Morrison explained. "The being inside has been asleep for 3 million years. Your actions here have convinced it to wake up." The rescue operation began immediately. Human engineering teams transported over to the Serenity's Grace with equipment that amazed the alien crew. Instead of trying to break the ancient defense grid by force, they worked with it. Chief Engineer Luna Martinez led a team that included Torvin and other alien engineers. They watched in fascination as the humans used tools that seemed to communicate directly with the architect technology. "How are you doing that?" Torvin asked, as Luna interfaced her equipment with an ancient control panel. "Pattern recognition," Luna explained. "The architects built their systems to respond to certain types of thinking. Humans are good at pattern recognition because our world taught us to see threats and opportunities quickly. The work was dangerous. The ancient systems were still testing everyone who came near them. But the humans seemed to understand the tests in a way that other species didn't. They worked with controlled aggression, taking calculated risks that would have terrified most aliens." On the cruise ship, Caladraan found herself working directly with the human rescue teams. She had expected them to be rough and violent, like the story said. Instead, she found them to be surprisingly gentle with the passengers, especially the children. "Why did you come to help us?" she asked a human engineer named Pete who was fixing the life support systems. Pete looked up from his work, his face smudged with grease. "Because you needed help. It's reason enough. But we're strangers. Different species. We might not do the same for you." Pete smiled. "Maybe not. But that's not why we do it. We do it because it's right." The rescue work continued for hours. The human ships formed a protective formation around the cruise vessel, while their crews worked to free it from the ancient grid. But they weren't just rescuing the ship. They were learning. Dr. Torres was working with scientists from the fleet to study the architect technology. What they found amazed them. The ancient machines weren't just defenses. They were teachers. libraries, and testing grounds all in one. This is incredible, she reported to Admiral Morrison. The architects left these systems to prepare younger species for contact with them. The tests weren't meant to harm us. They were meant to see if we were ready to learn. The architect vessel continued to approach slowly. As it got closer, it began to communicate, not with words, but with images and emotions projected directly into the minds of everyone present. The images showed the history of the galaxy, ancient wars between species that destroyed entire star systems, the architect's decision to withdraw and wait for younger races to mature, and threats from beyond the galaxy that were still coming. Captain Rex felt the alien thoughts in his mind and understood. The architects hadn't disappeared. They'd been preparing the galaxy for something terrible that was approaching from the empty space between galaxies. "Admiral," he said, "you seeing this?" Morrison nodded grimly. "We've known about the external threat for decades, Captain. That's why we built the Deep Space Fleet. That's why we've been preparing." The rescue of the Serenity's Grace was nearly complete. The human engineers had worked with the ancient systems to safely disable the containment field. But more importantly, they had proved something to the architects. They had proved that the younger races of the galaxy could work together when faced with impossible odds. Humans with their courage and determination, aliens with their diverse skills and perspectives. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. The architect vessel came to a stop near the defense grid. Its presence filled everyone's minds with a sense of ancient wisdom and terrible knowledge. The being inside had watched civilizations rise and fall across millions of years. Now it was ready to share what it knew. Admiral Morrison opened communication. Channels to all ships, human and alien alike. All vessels, prepare for formal first contact with an architect entity. What happens next will change the galaxy forever. The architect vessel settled into position near the defense grid, its massive form dwarfing even the largest human warships. As it stopped moving, the ancient structure began to change. Parts of its hull opened like flower petals, revealing chambers. Filled with soft golden light, Captain Rex felt the alien presence touch his mind again, but this time it was gentler. The thoughts that came weren't his own, but they felt familiar somehow. Images of Earth flowed through his consciousness, showing his homeworld as the architects had seen it millions of years ago. Voice spoke in everyone's mind simultaneously. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was simply ancient and wise beyond measure. "You have passed the tests that we set for you." Admiral Morrison stepped forward on her bridge, speaking aloud even though she knew the architect could read her thoughts. "We are honored by your contact, Ancient One. Humanity has been preparing for this moment." "Yes," the voice replied. "Have watched your species grow from primitive hunters to guardians of the weak. Your response to the distress call was expected. It is what makes you valuable." The passengers had gathered in the observation decks to witness this historic moment. Many were still afraid, but others were filled with wonder. Caladreon stood near a large window, watching the human ships arranged in protective formation around them. She was beginning to understand why these Deathworlders had such a strange reputation. They were dangerous, yes, but they used that danger to protect others. The architect's voice continued, reaching every mind in the fleet. "For 3 million years we have slept and waited. We left the defense grids to test the younger races, to see if any would develop the qualities needed for what is coming." "What is coming?" asked Dr. Torres, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. The answer came not in words, but in visions. Everyone present saw images of the dark space between galaxies. In that emptiness, things moved. Vast, hungry things that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but cold darkness behind them. "The Devourers," the architect explained, "destroyed our original galaxy before we fled to this one. We thought we had left them behind, but they followed the light of living worlds. They are coming here." Captain Rex felt a chill run down his spine. "How long do we have in your time measurement? Perhaps 50% of your years. Maybe less." "The Devourers move slowly, but they are inevitable unless..." Unless what?" Admiral Morrison asked. "Unless the younger races can do what we could not. Fight them and win." The images shifted, showing the architect's previous attempts to fight the Devourers, great battles among the stars, weapons that could shatter moons, fleets that covered entire solar systems. All of it had failed. The architects had been forced to flee, carrying the seeds of new life to this galaxy. "Why do you think we can succeed where you failed?" Rex asked. The architect's presence focused on him, and he felt ancient eyes examining his soul. "Because you are different. We architects were builders and teachers. We sought to create perfect harmony. But perfection cannot fight chaos. You humans, you come from a world that tried to kill you every day. You learned to fight, to adapt, to never give up." The massive vessel began to pulse with different colors of light. "In you, the presence turned toward the Serenity's grace, representatives of the diverse races of this galaxy.
Me?
Each of you brings different strengths. Together, you might achieve what we could not." Engineer Torvin, still working with the human teams, looked up from his repairs. "What do you want us to do? Learn, grow, prepare?" The architect's voice carried the weight of eons. "We will teach you what we know, give you access to our technology, but the real strength must come from within you." The rescue operation concluded as the ancient defense grid finally released its hold on the cruise ship. The Serenity's Grace was free, its life support systems restored by the combined efforts of human and alien engineers working together. But freedom from the grid was just the beginning. The architect vessel began to transmit data to all the ships present. Technical specifications for weapons and defenses beyond current understanding. Star charts showing the location of other sleeping architect facilities throughout the galaxy. Most importantly, tactical information about the Devourers and their weaknesses. Admiral Morrison coordinated the data reception on the human ships, while Captain Vorthok did the same for the cruise vessel. Both crews worked together, sharing information and resources in a way that would have been impossible before this crisis. Admiral called out Dr. Torres from her science station. "The information they're giving us, it's going to change everything. Space travel, energy production, weapons technology. We're looking at advances that would normally take centuries to develop." Morrison nodded grimly. "That's the point, Doctor. We don't have centuries. We have 50 years to prepare for a war. That will determine the survival of every living thing in this galaxy." The architect's presence withdrew slightly, allowing the organic minds around it to process what they had learned. "The first phase of preparation will be the most difficult," it explained. "The various races of this galaxy must learn to work together, as you have done here today. Unity will be essential." Caladrean stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. "Ancient One, many of our peoples fear and mistrust each other. The humans especially are seen as dangerous by most species. Fear can be overcome by understanding," the architect replied. "The humans' reputation as Deathworlders is both their burden and their strength. They will be the warriors this galaxy needs, but they cannot fight alone." The massive vessel began to change again, parts of it reshaping themselves into new configurations. "We will establish a base of operations here in this nebula. Representatives from all willing species will be trained in the use of architect technology. Humans will lead the military preparation, while other races contribute their unique abilities." Captain Rex looked around at his crew, then at the screens showing the alien passengers and crew of the Serenity's Grace. Hours ago, they'd been strangers from different worlds. Now they were allies in a fight for the very existence of their galaxy. "We accept the responsibility," he said formally. "Humanity will do whatever is necessary to protect this galaxy." Bors. Captain Vorthak's voice joined his. "The Serenity's Grace and her passengers volunteered to be the first ambassadors of this new alliance. We have seen what humans will do for strangers. We will help others understand." Architects' approval flowed through all their minds like warm sunlight. "Then let it begin. The awakening of the galaxy starts now. You have 50 years to prepare for the greatest battle in the history of life itself." As the great work began, the human fleet took up protective positions around the architect vessel. The Serenity's Grace prepared to return to civilized space, carrying news of this historic contact. And in the depths of the nebula, ancient machines began to wake up, ready to teach the younger races everything they would need to know. The galaxy would never be the same.
Oh.
But for the first time in millions of years, there was hope that it might survive what was coming from the dark between the stars. The purple sky of Nazira burned with orange flames as massive black shapes moved through the clouds. Ambassador Kretel pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the communication tower, his four eyes wide with terror. The sound of destruction echoed from every direction. Buildings collapsed in the distance, their debris falling like deadly rain. His people, the Villani, had ruled this star system for over 2,000 years. They were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and skilled diplomats. Their technology was advanced, their cities beautiful, and their military strong enough to protect their borders. But nothing had prepared them for this. The Drachmer had arrived 3 days ago. Kretel clutched his injured arm as he climbed the emergency stairs inside the tower. Green blood seeped through his fingers, but he ignored the pain. Every step was a struggle, but he had to reach the communication array. He was the only one left who could send the distress signal. The Drachmer were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They looked like machines, but they were alive. Their ships were not built, but grown, made of black metal that seemed to breathe. They consumed everything in their path, growing stronger with each planet they destroyed. Worlds that had stood. For millennia fell in ours, as Kretel reached the 20th floor. He could hear the creatures moving through the building below. Their footsteps sounded like metal grinding against stone. He had seen them up close during the first attack. They were tall, with bodies that seemed part machine and part living tissue. Their eyes glowed red like burning coals, and their hands ended in sharp claws that could tear through steel. The communication room was just ahead. Kretel pushed through the damaged door and saw the massive array still functioning. Emergency power kept the lights dim, but the equipment was working. He moved to the control panel with shaking hands. Outside the window, he could see the Drachmer ships hovering over the city. They were huge, each one the size of a mountain, with organic curves that pulsed with dark energy. Smaller ships moved between them like insects, carrying captured Villani to unknown fates. The screams of his people echoed through the air. Kretel activated the emergency broadcast system. The screen flickered to life, showing the communication channels to other worlds. He began typing the distress message with desperate speed. "This is Ambassador Kretel of the Villani Confederation." He spoke into the microphone, his voice trembling. "Our capital world, Nazira, is under attack by an unknown enemy. They call themselves the Drachmer. Our defenses have failed. Our fleet is destroyed. We need immediate help." The first response came from the Zephyrian Empire within minutes. Their message was short and cold. "We cannot spare ships for your conflict. The Drachmer are too dangerous. We wish you luck." More responses followed, each one the same. The Centauri Republic, the Orion Alliance, the Stellar Federation, all refused to help. They had heard stories of the Drachmer, and fear kept them away. No one wanted to face creatures that could destroy entire civilizations. Kretel felt hope dying in his chest. The building shook as something massive landed on the roof above. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. He could hear the Drachmer moving through the upper floors, searching for survivors. Then something strange happened. A new signal appeared on his screen coming from a distant part of the galaxy. The source was listed as Sol System 3rd Planet. Terra Kretel had never heard of this world, but the signal was strong and clear. "This is Admiral Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet," came a calm voice through the speakers. "We have received your distress call, Ambassador. What is your current situation?" Kretel stared at the screen in surprise. Someone was actually responding, not just sending a refusal. "Admiral Kane, thank you for answering. The Drachmer have taken our capital world. Our people are dying. Do you have ships that can help us?" There was a pause before the Admiral spoke again. "We are reviewing your situation now. Can you tell us more about these Drachmar? What kind of weapons do they use?" "They're living machines," Kretel explained quickly, looking nervously at the door as footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "Their ships are organic, and they grow stronger by consuming matter and energy. They have destroyed 12 worlds in our sector. Every military force that has faced them has been defeated. Understood, Admiral Kane replied. How many enemy ships are we looking at? Kretel checked his sensors. Over 40,000 vessels of various sizes. The largest are the size of small moons. Admiral, I must warn you, no one has ever successfully fought the Drachmer and won. Perhaps you should consider evacuating your own people instead of Ambassador, the Admiral interrupted, and there was something in his voice that made Kretel stop talking. We appreciate your concern, but we didn't become humanity's protectors by running from fights. The Terran Defense Fleet is mobilizing as we speak. How long can you hold your position? I don't know, Kretel admitted. The communication tower is the last secure position on the planet. They will find me soon. Then we need to move fast, Admiral Kane said. Ambassador, I want you to prepare yourself for what you're about to see. When we say we're mobilizing the fleet, we mean all of it. Before Kretel could ask what that meant, his sensors began showing impossible readings. Space above Nixera was filling with new contacts, appearing as if from nowhere. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of ships emerged from what looked like holes in space itself. Kretel's jaw dropped as he watched the display. 3,000 ships had appeared in formation above his world, but these were not ordinary vessels. Smallest were the size of Volani cruisers, while the largest were bigger than anything he had ever seen. They moved with perfect coordination, spreading into attack formations that covered the entire orbital space around Nixera. Admiral Kretel whispered into the microphone, Your fleet, ... it's enormous. What kind of people are you? From Earth, Ambassador, came the reply. On our world, we have a saying. When someone calls for help, you don't ask if you can win. You ask how fast you can get there. The door to the communication room exploded inward. A Drachmer warrior stepped through, its red eyes focusing on Kretel. The creature raised its clawed hand, ready to strike. But instead of fear, Kretel felt something he had not experienced in days. Hope. Above his world, 3,000 ships from a place called Earth were preparing to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. As the Drachmer warrior moved toward him, Kretel smiled and spoke into the microphone one last time. Admiral Kane showed them what Deathworlders can do. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TDF Retribution, watching the burning planet through the massive viewport. The orange flames dancing across Nixera's surface painted her face in flickering light. Around her, the bridge crew worked. With calm efficiency, their fingers dancing across control panels as they prepared for battle. Captain, called Lieutenant Blake from the tactical station. His voice steady despite the impossible numbers on his screen. Sensors are picking up over 40 billion hostile contacts. The Drachmer have completely surrounded the planet. Maya nodded without taking her eyes off the burning world below. She had read the reports during the journey here. 12 worlds destroyed, entire civilizations consumed, military fleets scattered like leaves in a hurricane. The Drachmer had never faced defeat. Today would be different. Communications Officer Davis, she called to a young woman at the COM station. Are you getting any signals from the planet's surface? Yes, ma'am, Davis replied, adjusting her headset. We have Ambassador Kretel on emergency frequency. His signal is weak but stable. He's requesting permission to observe our assault. Maya considered this for a moment. The alien had been brave enough to send the distress call. While his world burned around him, he deserved to see what happened next. Grant permission, she decided. Emergency transport to the bridge. The transport beam shimmered in the center of the bridge, and Ambassador Kretel materialized. Maya got her first look at their rescued ally. He was tall and thin, with pale purple skin and 4 large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Green blood stained his torn diplomatic robes, and one of his arms hung at an awkward angle. Ambassador Maya said, stepping forward. I'm Captain Rodriguez. Welcome aboard the Retribution. Kretel stared around the bridge with wide eyes. The human crew members were smaller than he had expected, but there was something about the way they moved that made him uneasy. They showed no fear, no hesitation, even though they faced an enemy that had destroyed armies. Kretel said, his voice shaking. I must thank you for coming, but I fear you do not understand what you face. The Drachmer have never been defeated. They adapt to any weapon, overcome any defense, Perhaps ... Perhaps you should consider retreat. Maya smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Crottle step backward. It was not cruel, but it was the smile of a predator who had found worthy prey. Ambassador, she said gently, you called the right people. On Earth, we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Today, evil meets good people with very big guns. Before Cretell could respond, the bridge lights dimmed to a soft red glow. Combat lighting. Around him, the human crew began their final preparations with movements that seemed almost like a dance. Each person knew exactly what to do, exactly when to do it, Captain Blake reported. The Drachmer have detected our presence. First wave is moving to intercept. Estimated contact in 4 minutes. Maya walked to her command chair and activated the fleet-wide communications. Her voice echoed through 3,000 ships scattered across the system. All vessels, this is Captain Rodriguez. Today we fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. Today we show the galaxy why humans answer distress calls. All ships, weapons free. Show them what Deathworlders can do. Cretell watched the tactical display with growing horror. The first wave of Drachmer ships was massive beyond belief. Each vessel was the size of a city, their organic hulls pulsing with dark energy. There were thousands of them moving in perfect coordination toward the human fleet. Captain, he whispered, there are so many. How can you possibly? His words died as the human fleet opened fire. The space around Nexira exploded into light. Weapons that Cretell had never seen before reached across the void, striking the Drachmer ships with impossible precision. But these were not the energy weapons he expected. Instead, streams of solid metal traveling at incredible speeds tore through the organic hulls. Kinetic bombardment, Maya explained, seeing his confusion.
And we learned long ago that energy weapons have limitations. Sometimes the old ways work best.
The Drachmer ships returned fire, their bioweapons creating streams of living energy that sought out targets like hunting animals. But the human ships moved like nothing Cretell had ever seen. They twisted and turned through space, their formations flowing like water around the enemy attacks. How do they move like that? He asked. In amazement, Lieutenant Blake answered without looking up from his station. Fighter pilot training, sir? Every ship captain in our fleet learned to fly in atmosphere first. When you can handle air turbulence and gravity, space combat becomes much easier. On the tactical display, Cretell watched human fighters diving into the swarms of Drachmer vessels. The fighters were tiny compared to their enemies, no bigger than atmospheric aircraft, but they moved with deadly purpose. Phoenix leader to all wings came a calm female voice over the communications. Remember, these things adapt to energy weapons after prolonged exposure. Switch to kinetics in 30 seconds. Cretell stared at the display in shock. They adapt to energy weapons? How did you know that? Maya looked at him with raised eyebrows. Ambassador, did you think we came here without doing research? We've been analyzing your distress signal and cross-referencing it with reports from other systems. The Drachmer may be dangerous, but they follow patterns. Humans are very good at recognizing patterns. The battle continued to unfold on the screens around them. First wave of Drachmer ships was already taking heavy casualties, their organic hulls unable to regenerate fast enough to counter the human weapons. But Cretell could see more waves forming behind them, each one larger than the last. Captain, Blake reported, enemy forces are regrouping. Second wave consists of larger vessels. Some are showing biosignatures we haven't seen before. Maya nodded. They're bringing out their heavy units. Good, I was starting to worry this would be too easy. Cretell stared at her in disbelief. Too easy, Captain? They have killed billions of people. They have destroyed entire star systems. Yes, Maya agreed calmly. And now they're about to learn why that was a mistake. The second wave of Drachmer. Ships approached, and Cretell could see they were different from the first. These vessels were larger, their hulls covered in weapon ports that glowed with malevolent energy. Some were so big they had their own gravitational fields, but the humans seemed unconcerned. If anything, they appeared more focused, more determined. Maya activated the communications again. All vessels, The enemy is escalating. Time to show them what we learned in the Soul Wars. Implement Formation Delta. Round Nexira, the human fleet, began to change its arrangement. Ships that had been spread across the system now moved into a complex, three-dimensional pattern that hurt. Cradle's eyes to follow. It was like watching a living organism rearrange itself. "What are they doing?" he asked. Maya's smile grew wider. "Something we learned fighting each other, Ambassador. On Earth we've had plenty of practice with space warfare. We just never had opponents worthy of our best tactics." The second wave of Drachmer ships struck the human formation like a hammer hitting water. But instead of breaking, the formation flowed around them, redirecting their attack back at them from unexpected angles. Drachmer ships found themselves caught in crossfires they never saw coming. But then something changed on the tactical display. Deep beneath Nexora's surface, sensors detected massive movement. Something was stirring in the planet's core. Something huge beyond imagination. Captain Blake's voice was tight with concern. "We're reading massive biosignatures from inside the planet. Something is coming up from the core." Maya's expression grew serious for the first time. "How big?" "Approximately 12,000 kilometers in diameter, ma'am. It's the size of a small moon." Credo felt his heart stop beating. It heard stories, rumors whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. The Drachmer's ultimate weapon, their planet killer, the thing they used when they wanted to consume an entire world at once. "Captain," he whispered, "that's their bioconstruct. Nothing has ever survived an encounter with one. It will devour your entire fleet." Maya was quiet for a long moment, watching the readings on her screen. Then she activated the fleet communications one more time. "All vessels, this is Rodriguez. The enemy is bringing out their big gun. It's time to show them ours. All ships, implement Protocol Omega." Credo had no idea what Protocol Omega meant, but the change in the human crew was immediate. The calm efficiency was replaced by something harder, more focused. These were no longer just soldiers following orders. It had become something else entirely. Something that made even a desperate ambassador from a dying world feel afraid. The space around Nexira transformed into something that looked like organized chaos. Commander Eric Volkov stood on the bridge of the Dreadnought Sovereign, watching his fleet execute Protocol Omega with deadly precision. His fingers moved across the tactical display, directing 3,000 ships, like pieces on a chessboard. "All wings maintain formation," Volkov's voice carried across the communication channels. "Remember, we're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting to send a message to every Drachmer in the galaxy." Ambassador Kretel gripped the railing on the Retribution's bridge as the human fleet began to move in ways that defied his understanding of space combat. Ships that should have collided passed within meters of each other, their movements coordinated. To the microsecond, it was like watching a deadly dance performed by masters who had practiced for centuries. "How do they do this?" he whispered to Captain Rodriguez, who stood calmly beside him. "Practice," she replied simply. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, Ambassador. We've learned a few things about coordination." On the tactical display, the Drachmer's second wave was already beginning to break apart under the human assault. But Credo could see the real threat rising from beneath Nexira's surface. The massive bioconstruct pushed through layers of rock and metal, its organic hull the size of a small moon. As it emerged, smaller Drachmer ships swarmed around it, like protective insects. "Sovereign to all vessels," Commander Volkov's voice cut through the battle communications. "The big one is coming up. All fighters, clear the engagement zone. Capital ships prepare for heavy bombardment." Hundreds of human fighters suddenly broke off from their battles with smaller Drachmer vessels and streaked away from the planet. Cradle watched them go with confusion. "Why are they retreating?" he asked. Lieutenant Blake looked up from his station. "They're not retreating, sir. They're getting out of the blast radius." Before Credle could ask what that meant, the human capital ships opened fire. But these were not the kinetic weapons they had been using before. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the largest human vessels, striking the emerging bioconstruct with devastating force. The creature's scream echoed across subspace, a sound of pain and rage that made every sensor on every ship vibrate. Instead of being destroyed, the bioconstruct began to adapt. Its organic hull shifted and changed, developing new armor that absorbed the energy weapons. "It's adapting!" Kretel shouted. "Just like I warned you!" Energy weapons become useless against them. Captain Rodriguez smiled grimly. "We know. We're counting on it." The bioconstruct fully emerged from Nixara's core, revealing its true size. It was larger than most moons, with thousands of weapon ports covering its surface. Biomechanical tentacles writhed around its bulk, each one capable of destroying a battleship. As it turned toward the human fleet, its massive eyes glowed with hungry intelligence. "All ships," came a new voice over the communications. This was pilot Anna Fisher, leader of Phoenix Squadron. "Remember what we learned in the Titan incident? All these things adapt to energy, but they have trouble with rapid changes in attack patterns." Kretel watched in amazement as the human fighters suddenly reversed course and dove straight toward the bioconstruct. But instead of using energy weapons, they began dropping physical objects from their cargo bays. The objects looked like simple metal cylinders, but when they struck the creature's hull, they began to burn with intense white fire. "Thermite charges," Blake explained, seeing Kretel's confusion. "They burn hot enough to melt through almost anything, and they keep burning even in vacuum." The bioconstruct can adapt to energy weapons, but it has trouble adapting to chemical reactions. The massive creature writhed in pain as hundreds of thermite charges burned through its outer hull. But even as it suffered, it began to learn. New defensive systems emerged from its flesh, attempting to sweep away the burning charges before they could penetrate deeper. That was when the human fighters switched. Tactics again. As Phoenix leader to all wings, Anna's voice was calm despite flying directly into the creature's defensive fire. "Switch to penetrator rounds. Let's see how fast this thing can heal from the inside." The fighters began firing. Armor-piercing projectiles that punched through the bioconstruct's hull and exploded deep inside its body. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the creature's massive form, disrupting its ability to coordinate its defenses. But the real surprise came from the human capital ships. Instead of continuing their energy bombardment, they began firing something completely different. Streams of superheated metals struck the bioconstruct's surface. But instead of trying to destroy it, they seemed to be coating it with something. "What are they doing now?" Kretel asked. Utterly bewildered, Commander Volkov's voice answered over the open channel. "Deploying nanite payload. Let's see how well this thing adapts to molecular-level warfare." The coating on the bioconstruct's hull began to spread and change. Kretel realized with shock that the humans had fired billions of microscopic machines at their enemy. The nanites were breaking down the creature's organic armor at the molecular level, faster than it could regenerate. The bioconstruct's response was immediate and terrifying. It began to pulse with dark energy, and suddenly the space around it filled with smaller versions of itself. Each one was only the size of a battleship, but there were thousands of them, and they moved with the same coordinated intelligence as their parent. "Spawn ships," Kretel cried. "It's creating copies of itself." But the humans seemed to have expected this too. The moment the spawn ships appeared, human vessels throughout the system began implementing new formations. Ships that had been fighting independently suddenly grouped into clusters of 5 or 6, each cluster working together like a single organism. "Wolfpack tactics," Captain Rodriguez explained. "Each group has different weapons and specializes in different targets. The spawn ships are dangerous, but they're also smaller and less adaptable than the main construct." Kretel watched in fascination as human ship groups began hunting the spawn ships with ruthless efficiency. One group would distract a spawn ship with energy weapons, while another group flanked it with kinetic bombardment. When the spawn ship adapted to those attacks, a third group would hit it with something completely different. "You're not just fighting them," he realized. "You're learning from them while they learn from you." "Now you're getting it," Rodriguez said. "The Drachmer's greatest strength is their ability to adapt, but adaptation takes time if you can change your tactics faster than they can adapt. You can stay ahead of them." The battle continued to rage around the massive bioconstruct. Human fighters darted between its defensive tentacles like insects, but insects with stings that could punch through. Armor plating. The larger human ships maintained their distance, coordinating their attacks to keep the creature off balance. But Kretel could see that the humans were paying a price for their tactics. Several fighter squadrons had been destroyed by the creatures. Defensive systems. 2 cruisers had been caught by bioplasma discharges and were drifting dead in space. The human fleet was winning, but they were not invincible. That was when something unexpected happened. The bioconstruct suddenly stopped, trying to attack the human fleet, and instead began to pull back toward Nexura's surface. At the same time, every remaining Drachmer ship in the system began broadcasting the same signal. "What's that sound?" Kretel asked, as a strange harmonic filled the bridge speakers. Lieutenant Blake's face went pale as he read his instruments. "It's a distress call. The bioconstruct is calling for help," Rodriguez asked. Blake's voice was barely a whisper. "From every Drachmer in the galaxy. The signal is being transmitted on subspace frequencies that can reach across the entire spiral arm." Kretel felt his heart sink. The humans had fought brilliantly, but now they would face the full might of the Drachmer swarm. Every ship, every bioconstruct, every weapon the creatures possessed would come to Negezra, but when he looked at Captain Rodriguez, she was smiling. "Perfect," she said. Admiral Kane was hoping they would do that. "Hoping," Kretel stammered. "Captain, they're calling their entire fleet here. There could be millions of ships." Rodriguez activated the fleet communications. "All vessels, this is Rodriguez. The enemy has just made our job much easier. Instead of hunting them across the galaxy, they're all coming to us. Prepare to implement the final protocol." Kretel stared at her in shock. "Final protocol? What could possibly be more destructive than what you've already shown me?" The captain's smile grew wider, and for the first time since meeting her, Kretel felt truly afraid of these creatures called humans. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "what you've seen so far was just us being polite. Now you get to see what we do when we stop holding back." The space around Nexera began to change in ways that made Ambassador Kretel's instrument scream warnings. The human fleet suddenly spread out into a perfect sphere formation surrounding the entire planetary system. Ships that had been fighting close together now moved to positions thousands of kilometers apart, creating a massive 3-dimensional web.
"Now what are they doing?"
Kretel asked, watching the tactical display with growing confusion. The humans had been winning the battle, but now they were spreading their forces thin, just as millions of Drachmer ships were about to arrive. Captain Rodriguez stood quietly on the bridge, her eyes fixed on something beyond the viewport. "There, preparing the battlefield, Ambassador. When you know your enemy is coming in overwhelming numbers, you don't meet them head-on. You make them come to you on your terms." The bioconstruct, still wounded from the human assault, began to pulse with dark energy. Its massive form started to sink back toward Nekera's surface. But instead of hiding, it began to do something that filled Kretel with horror. The creature was burrowing into the planet's core, its tentacles reaching deep into the molten rock. "It's going to consume the entire planet," Kretel whispered. "Once it feeds on Nexera's core, it will become unstoppable." Before Rodriguez could respond, the space around them began to tear open. Holes in reality appeared like wounds in the fabric of space itself, and from each hole came streams of Drachmer ships. First hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. The creatures had answered the bioconstruct's call with everything they had. Lieutenant Blake's voice was tight with tension as he read his sensors. "Captain, I'm counting over 2 million hostile contacts, and the number is still rising. Ship classes from destroyer size up to... My God, some of these things are the size of asteroids." Kretel watched the display in despair. The human fleet of 3,000 ships now faced an enemy force nearly 1,000 times larger. Even with their superior tactics and weapons, there is no way they could survive this. But the humans seemed strangely calm. If anything, they appeared more focused than before. Across the fleet, ship captains were implementing formations that Kretel had never seen, patterns that seemed to bend space itself around them. "All vessels," came a new voice over the communications. This was General Lisa Chen aboard the command. "Ship Olympus. Final protocol is authorized. All weapons are now weapons-free. Show them why we're called Deathworlders. The change in the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Ships that had looked like normal warships suddenly began to transform. Whole sections slid apart to reveal massive weapon arrays that had been hidden inside their structures. The largest vessels opened like flowers, exposing cores that glowed with barely contained energy. Fusion lance arrays charged. General Chen's voice echoed across the fleet. Antimatter torpedoes armed. Gravitational disruptors online. Kretel stared at Captain Rodriguez in shock. Gravitational disruptors? You have weapons that can manipulate gravity itself? Among other things, Rodriguez replied calmly. Ambassador, you asked us to help you fight an enemy that consumes planets. Did you think we would come without bringing planet killers of our own? The first wave of Drachmer ships reached the human sphere formation and immediately found themselves in trouble. Instead of encountering scattered human vessels, they flew into a carefully constructed maze of gravitational fields. Ships that tried to attack human vessels found their trajectories bent away from their targets. Others discovered they couldn't maintain course as invisible forces pulled them off balance. Gravitational mines, Blake explained, seeing Kretel's confusion. We seeded the entire area with devices that create artificial gravity wells. The enemy can't fly straight, can't aim properly, and can't coordinate their attacks. But the real shock came when the human ships began to fire their new weapons. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the fusion arrays, but these were not normal energy weapons. They burned through space itself, creating temporary tears in reality that consumed everything they touched. The antimatter torpedoes were even more devastating. Each torpedo contained enough destructive force to level a continent, and they moved through space like guided lightning. When they struck Drachmer ships, the explosions created brief new stars that lit up the entire system. This is impossible, Kretel breathed, watching Drachmer vessels the size of cities vanish in flashes of light. No civilization has weapons like these. How did you develop such technology? Rodriguez looked at him with an expression that was both sad and proud. Ambassador, we come from a world that has tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, plagues, predators that hunt in packs. Whether that can flatten cities? We didn't develop these weapons to fight aliens. We developed them to survive our own planet. The battle continued to rage around them, but now it was the Drachmer who were being overwhelmed. Their massive numbers meant nothing when they couldn't coordinate their attacks or even fly in straight lines. Human ships darted through the gravitational maze like they had built it themselves, which Kretel realized they probably had, but the bioconstruct was still a threat. Deep inside Nexora's core, the massive creature was feeding on the planet's molten heart. With each passing moment, it grew larger and more powerful. Soon, it would emerge as something even more dangerous than before. That was when General Chen activated something called the Nova Protocol. All vessels prepare for stellar ignition, her voice carried across the fleet. Target the planet's core. We're going to give our friend down there more energy than it can handle. Kretel watched in amazement as every human ship in the system turned toward Nazira and began charging their most powerful weapons. But instead of aiming at the surface, they were targeting something deep inside the planet. What are you doing? He asked frantically. If you destabilize the core, the entire planet will explode. That's the idea, Rodriguez said grimly. Bioconstruct feeds on energy, but there's a limit to how much it can absorb at once. We're going to force feed it the energy of an entire planet's core. The human fleet fired as one. Hundreds of fusion lances struck Nexira simultaneously, their beams penetrating deep into the planet's crust and mantle. The beams converged on a single point at the planet's center, where the bioconstruct was feeding. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Nexira began to glow. The planet's surface cracked like an eggshell as incredible energies built up in its core. The bioconstruct's screams echoed across subspace, but now they were screams of agony rather than rage. The creature had been designed to consume energy gradually, not to have the power of a star's core forced into it all at once, deep beneath the surface. The bioconstruct began to tear itself apart as it tried to process more energy than its organic systems could handle. Screams grew louder and more desperate as it realized it was being killed by the very thing it lived on. "It's working," Blake reported, his voice filled with amazement. "The bioconstruct is destabilizing, its biosignatures breaking apart." But the destruction of the bioconstruct had an unexpected effect on the other Drachmer ships. Their central coordinator, the millions of enemy vessels, began to lose cohesion. Ships that had moved in perfect formation started flying into each other. Others simply stopped moving entirely, as if they had forgotten how to function. "They're connected," Kretel realized. The bioconstruct wasn't just their weapon, it was their brain. Without it, they can't coordinate. Rodriguez nodded grimly, figured that out from analyzing their attack patterns. Every successful military force needs central command. Cut off the head, and the body dies. The space around Nasira erupted in a flash of light that could be seen from neighboring star systems. The planet's core had finally reached critical mass, and the explosion tore the world apart from the inside, but the bioconstruct died first, its massive form consumed by energies it could not control. As the light faded, Kretel saw that the Drachmer fleet was in complete chaos. Ships crashed into asteroids, others fired on their own allies, and many simply drifted dead in space. Without their central intelligence to guide them, they had become nothing more than debris. But even as victory seemed certain, Kretel noticed something on the long-range sensors that made his heart stop. More holes in space were opening at the edge of the system, and through them came something that dwarfed even the massive fleet they had just defeated. "Captain," he whispered, "there's something else coming, something much bigger." Rodriguez looked at the sensor readings and smiled. Grimly, the main fleet. "We were wondering when they would show up." "Main fleet?" Kretel stared at her in disbelief. "You mean what we just fought was only a small part of their forces?" "Probably," Rodriguez agreed. "Don't worry, Ambassador. We saved the best for last." Admiral Kane's voice suddenly filled the bridge, transmitted from his flagship at the edge of the system. "All vessels, this is Kane. The real enemy has arrived. Time to show them what happens when Deathworlders decide to end a war." Kretel looked out at the approaching darkness and wondered what could possibly be worse than what he had already seen. But as he watched the human fleet prepare for one final battle, he realized he was about to find out. Asterisk, 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 the darkness at the Tacnus. At the edge of the Nexera system began to move. Eh? What, Ambassador Kretel? At first thought, were shadows turned out to be ships so massive they blocked out the light of distant stars. The main Drachmer fleet had arrived, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Sensor readings are off the charts," Lieutenant Blake reported, his voice barely steady. "I'm counting over 50 million vessels. Some of them are the size of moons. The largest. The largest is bigger than most planets." Kretel gripped the bridge railing as he stared at the tactical display. The approaching fleet stretched across space like a living wall of darkness. Each ship pulsed with biomechanical life, and at their center moved something that hurt to look at directly. The Drachmer had brought their ultimate weapon, their World Eater, the thing they used to consume entire star systems. "That's the Void." "Ma," he whispered. "I've heard stories. It's supposed to be their original ship, the first one they ever created. It's not just alive, it's intelligent, and it's hungry for entire galaxies." Captain Rodriguez stood calmly on the bridge, watching the approaching darkness without fear. Around her, the human crew prepared for what seemed like certain death with the same quiet efficiency they had shown throughout the battle. Captain Kretel said desperately, "Surely now you must retreat. Even your weapons cannot face this. The Void Maw has consumed 100 worlds. It grows stronger with each victory." Ambassador Rodriguez replied softly, "You still don't understand what you're looking at. That fleet thinks it's coming to feed. What it's actually doing is gathering in one place so we can finish this war once and for all." Before Kretel could ask what she meant, Admiral Kane's voice filled the bridge from his flagship. "All vessels, this is Kane. Today we face an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Today we show them why humans don't just answer distress calls, we answer them with permanent solutions." Across the human fleet, something began to happen that made Kretel's sensors go completely insane. Ships that had already revealed massive weapons now began to change even more dramatically. The largest vessels opened like flowers, exposing cores that glowed with the light of captured stars. Others extended arrays that seemed to bend space around them. "What are those?" Kretel asked, pointing at the strange formations appearing. "Around the human ships." "Reality anchors," Blake explained, without looking up from his station. "The Drachmer use biodimensional technology to move between spaces. We're making sure they can't escape when this is over." The Void Maw reached the outer edge of the system and immediately began to feed. Asteroids, debris from destroyed planets, even light itself seemed to flow into its massive bulk. The creature was so large that its gravitational field began to affect the system's remaining planets. But the humans had prepared for this too. All vessels came a new voice over the communications. This was Colonel Marcus Stone, aboard the assault carrier Ragnarok. "Terran War Protocol is now active. All safety limitations are removed. Today we fight with everything we have." The change in the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Kretel had thought he understood these creatures, but now he realized he had only seen them being careful. The humans had been holding back, fighting with restraint to minimize collateral damage. Now, the restraints were gone. Ships that had seemed powerful before now revealed weapons that defied understanding. Beams of energy that didn't just destroy targets but erased them from existence entirely. Projectiles that punched holes through dimensions, allowing them to strike enemies from impossible angles. Mines that created miniature black holes, warping space around them. But the most shocking transformation was in the humans themselves. Through the fleet communications, Kretel could hear the voices of fighter pilots, marines, and ship captains. They no longer sounded like the calm professionals he had met. They sounded like apex predators who had finally found worthy prey. "Phoenix Squadron 2, all wings," came pilot Anna Fisher's voice, but now it carried a deadly edge. "Remember what these things did to innocent people? Show them what happens when they threaten our allies." The human fighters dove into the Drachmar, fleet like wolves, attacking a herd. But these were not ordinary attack runs. The pilots moved with a coordination that seemed impossible, their ships flowing around enemy fire like they could predict the future. When Drachmar vessels tried to adapt to their tactics, the humans changed faster than the creatures could learn. "Do they move like that?" Kretel asked in amazement, watching human fighters dodge weapons fire that should have been impossible to avoid. "Instinct," Rodriguez explained.
On Earth.
"Everything tries to kill you. Whether animals, plants, diseases, even the ground under your feet. Humans who survived learn to read danger before it arrives. These pilots aren't just flying ships, they're hunting." The battle escalated quickly as the Drachmar realized they were facing something new. Ships that had never known defeat found themselves outmaneuvered by creatures a fraction of their size. Bioweapons that had consumed worlds were countered by human technology that seemed to violate the laws of physics. But the real shock came when the human Marines began boarding the largest Drachmar vessels. "Boarding parties away," Colonel Stone reported calmly. "Time to take this fight to their home ground." Kretel watched in disbelief as tiny human assault pods punched through the hulls of city-sized Drachmar ships. The creatures inside those ships had never faced enemies in close combat. They were used to consuming opposition from a distance, not fighting warriors who had evolved on a world where everything was dangerous. Through the communications, he could hear the Marines fighting inside the bioships. Their voices were calm, professional, deadly. They moved through the organic corridors like they belonged there, turning the creature's own ships against them. "Breach Team Alpha, we've reached the neural center," came a voice from inside one of the largest ships. "Planting. Charges now. This one won't be adapting anymore." One by one, the largest Drachmar vessels began to go dark as human Marines destroyed their central nervous systems from within.
Oh.
Ships that had seemed unstoppable became floating debris, their biomechanical systems failing as their brains died. But the Void Maw itself remained untouchable, too large for boarding actions, too powerful for conventional weapons. It continued to feed on the system's matter and energy, growing stronger with each passing moment. That was when Admiral Kane activated humanity's final weapon. All vessels prepare for stellar cascade. His voice carried absolute authority.
Our
Going to give our friend there more than it can swallow. Around the edge of the system, the largest human ships began to glow with impossible brightness. They were aiming not at the Void Maw, but at the system's star itself. You're going to destabilize the sun? Creddle asked in shock. Not destabilize. Rodriguez corrected. Accelerate. We're going to force it to go supernova early. The Void Maw feeds on energy, but there's a limit to how much it can consume at once. We're going to find that limit. The human fleet fired as one, their most powerful weapons striking the star's core simultaneously. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the star began to pulse with increasing brightness. The Void Maw sensed what was happening and tried to escape. But the reality anchors held it in place. It began to scream across subspace, a sound of pure terror as it realized it was trapped with a dying star. The supernova erupted across the system like the birth of a new universe. The Void Maw tried desperately to consume the stellar energies, but there was too much, too fast. The creature that had devoured galaxies was torn apart by forces beyond its ability to control. As the light faded, silence fell across the system. The Drachmer fleet was gone, erased by the supernova. The Void Maw was nothing but scattered particles drifting in space. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries had been ended in a single battle. Admiral Kane's voice filled the communications one final time. All vessels, this is Kane. The Drachmer threat has been neutralized. Ambassador Cradle, your people are safe. The galaxy is safe. Cradle looked around the bridge at the human crew, these creatures who had just destroyed an enemy that entire civilizations had fled from. They were checking their instruments, filing reports, cleaning their weapons. They acted like they had just finished a routine patrol instead of saving the galaxy. Admiral Credle said into the communicator, his voice shaking with emotion. How can we ever repay what you've done? Kane's reply was simple and final. Ambassador, we have a saying on Earth. No one fights alone. Today you learned that when Deathworlders answer a distress call, we don't come to drive off the monsters, come to make sure they never threaten anyone again. The human fleet began to form up for departure, their mission complete. As they prepared to leave, Credle realized that the galaxy would never be the same. Word would spread about the humans, about what they could do when they decided to end a war. From now on, when civilizations sent out distress calls, they would hope for the same response that had saved Nixira. They would hope that the Deathworlders would answer.